Hello, welcome on today's session where we are talking about the conceptual understanding of the communication. And specifically today, we're going to talk about the barriers of communication. My name is Joel Wang'uba. Before we proceed, I would like to share this with you that by the end of this session, it is expected that you as a learner should be able to familiarize with different types of communication barriers, as well as developing awareness of language-related barriers in learning. That goes with uh, by the end of it, now you have to be able to develop skills in overcoming communication barrier. We say communication is one of our basic needs, and of course, we require to communicate with many people for personal or professional purposes. But while communicating, we may face some challenges, some problems. Sometimes the message is not passed properly or gets lost on the way. There are chances of misunderstanding between senders and the receivers. Sometimes language used in communication is not understood properly. But sometimes, people in communication, their minds are with so many other things that makes them not to be able to communicate properly. This results into communication breakdown or communication failure, we can call it in other words. There are many reasons behind the problems of communication process. And today we are going to look a few of them, which are physical or environmental, language barriers, psychological barriers, and social cultural barriers. All right, not all barriers of communication are caused by people. There are many environmental factors affecting the communication process. Of course, the message can be blocked by environmental factors. Think of the physical settings. Think of the situations where communication takes place. And this takes us to think of uh, external noises. Think. And uh, some writers are saying that these external noises is one of the most recognizable environmental barriers in communication because it makes it difficult or sometimes impossible for people to hear one another, to listen to one another. Now think you communicating to a person who is in a music concert and you have an urgent oral message that you want to communicate. Will you be able? Of course, there may come a challenge. But also think of the climate. Now, you as a teacher or as a learner, you're in a classroom which the temperature is too high, very hot in class. Will you be able to concentrate? Think of being in a class which is very cold, very cold. For example, in Tanzania, the southern highlands regions, there are places in Tanzania which are very, very cold. Now think, and of course, we see that this is one of the barrier because it may make a person become agitated, make a person frustrated, make a person uncomfortable. Now, being in those situations will, of course, lead you to not be able to communicate. But also think of the place and the space. Places where there is not enough space for conversation, or places where there are too many people nearby. Of course, this can lead to the to altered communication. But as well, think being in a place with poor lighting or uncomfortable furnitures. Of course, yeah, being uncomfortable while communicating can lead to failure of the communication. But others are physical distance. Now with the physical distance, it's you can think of it in like the distance between the two people can also affect the way people can communicate with one another. The other one is language barriers. We say language is needed for any kind of communication. Even people with speech impairment can communicate with sign language or braille. Now, communication becomes difficult in situations where people do not understand each other language. The inability to communicate using language is known as language barrier in communication. Now, with this, we look at the difference in language, the use of jargons and slangs, the word choices, and the linguistic ability. With the difference in language, um, this is when two people are speaking two different languages. Now, so I'm speaking English. You're speaking, let's say you're speaking Luo. Now, can these two people communicate? That becomes a barrier because you'll never be able to communicate to one another. But the use of jargons and slangs, we say these jargons are the technical words used in communication. It might be different according to different profession. Now think of a medical doctor. They have the terminologies, they have the jargons there in the technical field. But think of a lawyer. They have, the language used in these two professions. They are extremely different. Now, if these people now start to talk using the jargons, will they be understand one another? No way. But think of the word choices. In our languages, there are some words which have multiple meaning. They have meaning, more than one meaning. Then you have to be very careful in the choice of words that you're using as you're communicating. The other thing is linguistic ability. This is the capability of a person in a particular language. Now, if a person with high vocabulary and linguistic ability talks to one another with low ability, the second person, of course, will not understand the words used, and this will lead to miscommunication, and that will become a barrier. Another type of communication barrier is the psychological barrier. Now, this psychological, let's look at this word psych. Psych means mind. So, psychological barriers arise in the mind. Human mind is said to be a very complex thing to understand. Now, we face many times some conflicts due to situations or surrounding events. So the barriers are bound to arise. But a real problem is that people do not accept that these barriers exist in their mind. And you know why? It's because of status, old age, ego problems. Many times psychological barriers are created. So these these barriers, psychological barriers, are very difficult to overcome because people do not accept that they face the barriers, or they lack proper understanding to face the world. Now, let's look at these things later. Um, think of prejudice, the wrong opinion about people on the basis of the community or caste or religion, or on the personal basis, is very negative for communication. Prejudice can hamper the communication. But think of the emotions and feelings, emotional disturbances of the sender or the receiver. This can distort a message. But what about the negative image, the self, this is the negative self-image of a person. And here we talk that, positive or negative image about self is the way of looking at the world. Now, the negative self-image can destroy communication. Such people with negative self-image think negatively and do not look at the things or events properly. But what about the perceptions? Think of the perceptions. The way we look at the world or the attitudes determines how we communicate. Now, having wrong or negative perception can create difficulty in communication. But to some learners, this is something known as daydreaming things. Sometimes learners were in class, but many do have habits of dreaming or things, think about something else when some lecture or some lesson is on progress. And this obstructs the communication because the link between the teacher and the learner is broken, and there comes it becomes a barrier. As we're approaching the end of the today's session, there are some things I'd suppose that we take into consideration. That communication is very crucial in almost every human activities, every daily human activities. Now think of school, think of any organization, think of the office, think of everywhere. Communication is very crucial. That means Poor communication leads to bad decision making and overall poor businesses. But good communicators, good communicators must therefore be aware of the barriers and work to overcome them to ensure clear and concise delivery of a message. This is a call upon us all that now let's go ahead and be good communicators. Okay, one last thing that I would like to share with you today is that it's kind of reflective task of which you'll go to look at this breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic in the world. We have heard a lot of information, so much information. We have heard about, till the time no cure has already been found. We have heard about country borders being closed, cities being closed, but there's been daily has we have been receiving about increasing number of dead people all over the world, and of course this has caused confusion, has caused panic, has caused people are at unrest situation. Now, from your perception, from your perspectives in relation to what we have covered today, do you think there has been some communication barriers, some communication failures, some communication whatever obstruction or whatever you think of it? Now, if it is yes, would you please tell me why? I'd love to receive your responses through my email, which is jomtani@outlook.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.